Good morning and welcome to the Tipsy Garden. This morning we thought we would give you a little bit of a garden tour just to give you some background on us. My name is Justin. My photographer is David, my husband. We've been living at this residence, which is property of my parents, for about almost 7 years now. This will be, is it our 5th or 6th season here? I think it's 6.
I think it's 6.
I think so too. But anyways, we kind of got our own little permaculture thing kind of going on. I've been reading a lot of books since moving here, got into gardening, and as you can see from looking around us, it's kind of taken over our lives. So, hence the fact that we've started a YouTube channel this year. I just get inundated with questions all the time as far as how do I take care of this, how do I do that. So I thought this would be a good way for you guys to have resources for yourselves to explore the plant world, as well as maybe a little bit of permaculture if you're into that. So as you can see, this building behind us here, that coop that you see, David drew that up and built that himself. So we do have plans for that. We could probably post a picture of what he drew up. It's not an exact thing. I mean, nothing is perfect as far as the setup goes, but we really like it. And there's a little bit of detailing that still needs to be done as far as the painting and the trim and things, but those are all aesthetic things. So functionally, it's pretty awesome. And then we have our flock of girls, and they all have names. I won't get into all of that with you, but
maybe we can do a meet and greet later.
Yeah, we could do that. As far as care goes, they're super easy, like you wouldn't even believe. We just give them fresh food, water daily, and then as far as getting the eggs and everything, we try to get on top of it every single day. But sometimes we miss a day here and there, and that's no big deal. So, anyways, that's the chickens. And then if you want to pan over here, David, to this bed, this is one of the oldest beds. This is probably one of the first things I did when we moved in here. And all of these guys, the hollyhocks, are from seed, as well as the borage, which I just stepped on. We had a really heavy rain last night, so everything's kind of like, meh. It's not, it doesn't look bad, but it looks past its prime. But that's one of those things, when you start a YouTube, I just have to get over that. I'm like, something's gonna look imperfect, and maybe that'll benefit you guys as I go along. So this little rose, I'm not sure the variety. I want to say it's called Annabelle. It's an old cottage rose, but it is awesome. And I'll try and do some research and follow up with a tag on the video if I can figure out what that variety is. But that's an amazing rose. We used to have a honeysuckle back here, but the last few years it's just been so hot that that petered out on us. So I filled in the gaps here where we had that with some sunflowers from seed this year. And then here we have a little bit of, this is called Love Lies Bleeding Amaranth. And those get really cool, like it's starting to tassels on them. And then we also have, whenever you have chickens and you compost, you'll find that if you don't cook your compost long enough, some of those seeds will germinate. And so that's what's happening here, is we've got a couple little tomatillo plants coming up in the edges, and I just haven't had the heart to tear them out. So, this little guy, this trellis, was original to when we first got together, our apartment, and we grew, that was my first garden. I just had those 5 little tiny pots, remember?
I do. And
that was our first garden, and so it's kind of nice to have it be a part of our everyday garden now. So if you want to follow me up front, this is our main entrance to our property. Note the garden sign. I like to add little bits of decor throughout just to give it a little bit extra. Again, everything's pretty beaten down by the rain. We've got a couple of entry pots near the entryway that I do annuals in. These were starting to look kind of empty just because the Johnny jump ups are fizzling out from the heat. And so I'm gonna pop these guys in there, and we'll be doing a video on what these are and talk about hummingbird attracting plants. We don't get a ton of hummingbirds here, but I'm definitely working towards it, so we'll share any success that we have with that with you guys. And then what I have here is my little summer home for the cacti and succulents. And this is just a handful of the collection. It's since gotten a little bit more out of hand. We have like a cute little entry garden, or inside garden on in one of our south facing windows where we put most of our succulents and cactus. But these guys are all living here for the summer. And then all of the window boxes you see are things that we've added throughout the years. So this one here, which in hindsight, I would say we're gonna plant more shade compatible plants the next time around. And I may at this point, whoops, sorry chicken. That thing's broke, I gotta fix it, whatever. At this point, we may take these out and try and plant them out somewhere else, and then replace them with something that would be a little bit more shade compatible, because I like that they're full and happy, but I would like to see more color here. And that's something that if you're new to gardening and you're feeling intimidated by it, don't feel like you have to like do it once and be happy with it. If you're not happy with it, there is so much mobility with gardening. I mean, you do you. If you don't want to look at it, spruce it up. There's nothing in your garden is permanent. That's the best thing about gardening, is it's all personal to you. So as we move along, which you'll see a couple things in here that in my mind they worked better than they did in reality. And so like if you pan up, you can see a really sad pussy willow in the back. Which I think it's just getting way too much radiant heat off the side of the house, and that's why those leaves look like that. So we gotta find him a new home at some point, which at this point the columbine is coming in and taking over the height in that back area, which is what I needed back there. And so that's something that we can fix. And that's why it's nice to plant things in pots too, because you can move them throughout your blank spaces in your gardens throughout the seasons to create that nice fullness. Couple other plants I really like in here that are great plants that I would recommend trying are, back here is the bronze fennel. That serves as a host plant for the swallowtail butterflies, which are those really pretty yellow butterflies with like the blue and red spots on the ends of their tails. Super cool plant. I love that. It's great on fish. It's also edible. And it attracts pollinators like nobody's business because it gets these nice big yellow umbel flowers. We also have throughout our garden a ton of Asiatic lilies, which I love. People who have pets, I wouldn't recommend them just because, unless you're somebody who's on top of your pets and is a good supervisor and doesn't let them eat things. They do have really potent poison in their pollen, but they're beautiful, nice big pink lilies when they do come through. And I would encourage you guys too, what I've done with my garden is, if you look back here, David, I incorporate herbs throughout my perennial beds, because not only do they come back really well and they're strong hardy plants, but they also give you different foliar accents and textures, and just different things that you start to appreciate plants for. That back there on the ground right there is a big sage plant that I planted about 2 years ago. And so I'll never have to buy another sage ever again, because I planted it in the ground and it comes back year after year, which is a nice thing too. And then some of the lighting might be weird as we come through here, just because the sun is now starting to creep over that area. All of this was grass when we first moved in. As you can see, it's no longer grass. And my dad has let us do projects throughout, and I think they enjoy it. I think it's a little overwhelming to them when they come up here. They're not as big of plant people. But they're learning. Couple things that are looking really nice right now are this guy here. This is called rose mallow or rose campion. It's a relative of the hollyhock, has similar leaf structure, and it's a great garden plant. But I would warn you, in our area where we garden, we've noted and learned that this is a little bit invasive. By a little bit, I mean you're gonna have to pull it out of the places you don't want it. But right here, we kind of just let it do its thing because it gives a lot of nice, pretty impact for the summer. So we're happy to let it take over that spot. And I'm just sipping on my coffee in the meantime. Come around this way, babe. I'm show them this sunflower. The sunflowers are a fun story because I was never a huge fan of sunflowers until my younger sister decided she wanted them at her wedding. And so for all of her showers and things like that, I decided, well, I'll grow some and I can make arrangements to take to her showers and her different parties that she had coming up for her events. And so that's the story of the sunflowers. And the sunflowers that you see this year are all a result of that selective breeding and hybridizing that I've been doing for the last 3 years. So, which if you guys want to see more of that, we can get into that about how to close pollinate things and how to save seeds and things like that too. But they're starting to come into their own with the heat of the summer, and they just look really cool. So I just love how tall they get, and the stalks. Look at the stalks on them. How thick they get. They get these huge, massive stalks. But beautiful plant. And then right up here, you'll see this is our dill patch. This all self-seeded from last year. I had one plant that I planted, and then it comes back. But this is a great plant for pickling, nice usable herb. It's also beautiful, but I just love the flowers it gets, the little umbel flowers. And they bring in pollinators like crazy. And then, hi little bird. You see the dove? Hanging out up there. This tree is original to the property. That is a green ash tree. I have in the back of my mind that probably in the next few years, if that tree does get sick with the ash borer, which is coming through, that we will have a plan to replace that. So everything that I'm doing underneath it is a direct result of my planning for the future as far as trying to be sustainable. So things that I have in the shade are also things that could probably do okay with a little bit of sun. But at some point we'll probably, if this tree does have to be removed, replace it. We'll grind out the stump and plant a new ornamental tree, which has less insect or disease issues. This front bed here was really inspired over the last 2 years by Gertrude Jekyll, who was a gardener in the Renaissance times of England. And I just really fell in love with some of the literature that she left behind and the ideas that she had about plants. And so what I try to do is I do a potager kind of garden, which is a mix of herbs, edibles, and flowers for high impact and then also heavy harvests. And the denser I have found that you plant things, the less you have to weed, which is great. And it's also really pretty and beautiful, and it's a conversation piece in our neighborhood. People walk by and they'll take pictures. When I'm out here in the morning pulling weeds before work, they'll hit me up with questions about different plants. What is this, you know? So that's why we decided, let's start YouTube and let's start talking about all of these things and why I do it. And really the big part of why this all came to be is because the more I fell in love with plants and read about plants, the more I realized that it was really important for us as people to be stewards of our land, to be stewards of what we want for the future. And I think this is so much better than looking at a green lawn, and it takes less water and it takes less maintenance, and it's beautiful and it brings joy to people. Not to mention it is National Pollinator Week. So it's really important to be thinking about what can I do for the pollinators to be sustainable and to create environment for the birds, the bees, the different insects and things that benefit us, because we are all interconnected. And at this point with climate change and just the things that are going on in our everyday world, it's so important just to be connected. Which gets me into this next plant. This is something that I had never planted or tried in all my years of gardening, and I wish I would have started sooner. But I planted this guy from seed last year. This is a ornamental milkweed. And these are actually host plants for monarch butterflies, which is so important because the monarchs are just, their populations are decimating. And if we don't step up and start seeing this in more gardens, we might not see monarchs in a few years. So it's a sad reality, but I'm doing my part, and I encourage you guys to do your part if you have the space to do it. And milkweed wouldn't be hard to grow in a patio pot either if you wanted to do that in an apartment complex. If you think, oh, I can't do any of these things. Most of this stuff is so transferable to container gardening, and that's such a great way to start and get into it and aspire to have more space, because that's how we started. So, and then as you walk this way, all of this edging and the boxes and everything, David built the boxes. And then last year we had about 2-3 tons of this big river rock brought in that we just bordered around all the beds to give it a more natural look. And some of the plants that you see here, this is that are looking really good on this trellis here, are ornamental sweet peas. These are awesome. If you think, oh, I would love to have cut flowers around or have a vase of flowers from my own garden, this is something you need. And I will be happy to give you seeds if you live in the area. But these little ornamental sweet peas are just such great cut flowers. They last for about a week in a vase, and they're just super pretty. But I thought, what a fun way to like mask the mailbox here. And then the tree is kind of getting out of control. We'll have to trim that up. But I don't know, what do you want to look at? Let's see. A couple other things that are looking really nice right now, big pollinator attractors, are the veronicas. I've got a blue one and like a purple lavender colored one. And then on the sides of either of those, I have salvias. So we have got, and penstemons. Salvias, penstemons, yarrows. Yarrows are the yellow ones back there with the umbel flowers. I have found that anything with little tiny flowers, the pollinators love. And so you'll see a lot of plants that sport little tiny multi-flowers because they just bring the pollinators in like crazy. Let's walk over this way and we'll talk about this bed. So right here, when we first moved in, this was all weeds. And it was probably one of the worst areas to weed in our entire property because it was just full of those really like prickly thistles. And so what I've done is these irises have kind of a fun story. Like the big strappy leaves you see there, those are all irises that come back every year in the spring and bloom really pretty. It's a nice, really pretty purple, blue tall flower. And those are great for our area. Irises are like a new addiction of mine. I will have them everywhere because they're low maintenance, they bloom vigorously, and they take little care. But those ones there are actually a result of our neighbor over here. It's a rental property. They decided, oh, we want a paved area in the front of the house, like a nice patio for people to hang out on. So they had these up by their doorway and ripped all those out. We're gonna throw them away. They were laying on a tarp in front of their property. And me being the gardener I was like, well, I can't see those plants go to waste. And so I asked them if I could have them. And that's how this garden came to be. Was I just decided, well, I have this grass here that no one's taking care of and is full of weeds. And so we dug the whole first layer of soil down about 6 inches, got all the weed roots out, built it back up with some compost from our chickens, and planted those irises there. And then as a result, we've just been planting little cottagey garden kind of things like the bachelor buttons, the cosmos, which are coming up like gangbusters this year. They're gonna be so pretty. And then sunflowers, as well as some Swiss chard, sweet peas. There's like this lovely little single petaled rose that comes up there. I do need to go in here and deadhead a little bit. It's looking a little bit past its prime. And then just a little mix of annuals in here too, like this cool little tower that we found at like a thrift shop that I turned into a planter. So we've got some petunias and some silver lace vine, and it's just really pretty back over here. I do enjoy it. Some more sunflowers. These guys self-seeded from last season. Got another milkweed. Our beautiful pot of petunias, which is drooping a little bit because of the rain last night. And then this guy here, the Jack Van Eyck clematis, which I'm gonna have to figure out how to get some more water to that because it's just not looking as great as it has looked in years prior. And I think part of that is because I finally got it up on a trellis, whereas it used to just grow along the ground and ramble. And I think it must have, being closer to the ground, had more moisture to it, or at least trapped more moisture to it. So we gotta figure out how to get that better. But we'll come back here now that we've seen the front garden pretty good. You should give them a view from here, our little bench. This plant here is an awesome plant, nice ground cover, plumago. Towards the midsummer, probably pretty soon here, it'll start flowering with little blue flowers. And then come in the fall, it will turn like this really vivid bright red on the leaves. And then it dies back down to the ground, and I chop it all the way back and it comes back fresh in the spring. But great plant. When you're planting things throughout your garden, it's good to think of multi-season interest because that's something that's going to give me 3 different seasons of interest, and it's one plant. So it's taking up a lot of real estate, as you can see, but it provides me 3 different seasons of beauty. So looking back over here. So again, this was all grass about a year ago. Some of the things we tried, we had an Ishiki willow in here on standard. And for whatever reason, this last winter, it just didn't make it. So we've since replaced that with the little yellow or little red twig dogwood, which you see there. And she's starting to find her own. She had a little bit of a rough go as soon as we planted her. the temperatures jumped up into the hundreds for like the next few days, so that's why she has a little bit of burn on her, but she'll come back. And then I don't remember, I think this is called zebra grass. I can't remember. That's the common name. It's not the scientific name, but wonderful grass. I love the big structure that brings there in the middle of the garden. And then we're coming up on some gay feather, which is just about to start blooming. Liatris is what it's also called, this common name. But last year this was like 2 blooms, and this year it's gonna be gorgeous. And these get big purple plumes on them that the birds like to come down and perch on, and they'll eat the seeds out of that. And then another really cool plant is this big hardy hibiscus. I can't wait to see that. The blooms on that get like probably 6 to 8 inches across. They're very big. But just do a nice pan through here. Lots of really pretty perennials, lots of hardy annuals like the snapdragons. Those will self-seed at the end of the season. And so those ones there are from last season that self-seeded. But lots of really pretty things. And I incorporate bulbs in all of my perennial beds because they bring a lot of spring and summer interest. So like right now the glads are starting to come up. Those will be really pretty come late summer. And we've got some dahlias, which are also a summer bulb that come up. And then come in the fall, we'll do a video on how to add in tulips and daffodils and alliums and all of your really cool early spring interest flowers, because they don't sell those as flowers at the garden centers. They sell them as corms or bulbs. And so if you want those kinds of things in your garden, you have to plan for it. So, did you pan around and show them the shade garden? This is vinca vine that you see, the like white creamy variegate leaf ground cover. That's original to the property. That was here before, or here when we first moved in. And then we've since added in a few peonies, which do okay. They flowered the best they've ever flowered this year, which are these two back here on the supports. Whenever you're growing herbaceous peonies like that, note that those plants get really big and floppy. And so it's nice to have some structure, like a nice little ornamental trellis or something for them to get some extra support on, because those blooms are super heavy. And then we've got a lemon lace elderberry and a black lace elderberry, which we planted last season. And both of those plants were kind of like meh, sad little plants when we put them in there. And since they're starting to find their groove here, had a little bit of grossness on it. Nice little shade container, which we just did. And then we'll go this way. The spireas are starting to bloom. If you see a weed, pull it. That's how I feel about it. And then I just throw it and forget it. Sneak back through this way. This little bench David built, and I painted it last season, and then I've since got little pillows and things for it. It needs to be cleaned up. It got rained on. And then you're back to the entryway garden. And this has been my learning garden, because a lot of the things, the big tall things, I planted up towards the front, which in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I would have planted them further back, so I had more of like a gradual flow to it. But I kind of feel like it gives it some additional charm too, because it's just like, well, this is how you learn. And so that's where a lot of your like little trellises and supports and things come in handy, because it helps me keep these big huge plants off of the path and from flopping over into our walking area. Another cool plant that is in this front garden is this Allium Millennium. Those were actually the plant of the year 2 years ago. But those are super pretty, aren't they? They're just starting to bloom. This is their season. They bloom for a really... Anyways, great plant. It blooms all the way through from like this time now, which is what, June, like mid-June, and it blooms all the way through fall. So, and after it's done blooming, it leaves like really cool little seed heads too. So we're gonna walk right back this way. I wanted to grow more lavender this year. It doesn't do great in our soil, so what I've done is I've made like a little lavender walkway in front of our chickens here with just some terracotta pots. And at the end of the season, I'll come through and I'll shear those back and put them in the greenhouse for the winter. This guy here is our zucchini this year. It's just starting to flower and go pretty crazy. We're gonna have a lot of zucchini on this plant. Pretty excited about that. Original things to this garden here is this big juniper shrub. I did tear half of it out because it was sickly on the other half when we first moved in, and that was an undertaking. And then getting through one half of it, I decided, well, I'm gonna leave this other half and see if I can't restore it to something beautiful. And I'm so glad that I did, because it gives us so much like winter structure in this area, and it's just such a pretty, nice evergreen structure here. Grown some blueberries in some pots this year. I have top dressed them with pine needles because they like really heavy acidic soil, and that's what they make ericaceous mulch out of, is pine needles and pine debris, and that acidifies your soil. So if you top dress with some pine needles every couple weeks when they blow out of the trees or whatever, that will actually help the health of your blueberries. And they don't do great in our ground because our soil is very heavy and alkaline, being near the Rocky Mountains. And so that's the way that you can grow blueberries successfully in our area. So I'll probably do a video about that just because it's a lot to get into. Over here, this is our original cottage garden. We have little ground cover violets all throughout here that just have taken over. We have, for the silver accent of the foliage, we have a, what is that called? Artemisia. And then I also like to do a couple of little annuals throughout here. We also have some echinacea coming up, which I have tried to remove that because it doesn't typically flower great over here because it's very heavy shade. And that was something that I did earlier on in my early garden years. So, the star of this garden is probably our nice, pretty blood-good Japanese maple back there behind the rock. I love the structure of that. Just a really pretty foliar accent. And then this archway was a result of a really bad snowstorm that we had one year, and instead of throwing out these old branches, we thought, well, let's give this branch that overhangs and protects this area, kind of acts as a natural umbrella for the area of the apple tree. So we perched that up and supported it with these extra additional supports, and I just like the character it brings. I feel like it makes it feel very woodland in here, and very like, I don't know, it's just a whimsical thing. As we come this way and pan that way, that back area that you see has gone a little bit wild back there. We've got catmint, a lilac that has struggled for years. I don't know if we'll be keeping that, but we did saw it back to the ground this year to give it a rejuvenation prune, just to see if that would kick it into gear. And it's growing, but it still just doesn't look the healthiest. So we're keeping an eye on that. I know. This garden here, nice shade perennials. We've got hostas. Brunera is a great plant if you don't have that for a heavy shade area. I highly recommend that. And then this loops around the side of the apple tree here. This path does. To our cold frame, which is a mess right now. I'm not going to show you that. More herbaceous peonies, a little bit past their prime, still really pretty. And then this path just kind of winds through here to our main vegetable garden, which is here in the middle. This all used to be grass right here. And since it's become perennial beds and obviously a place to grow food. So we've got all of our cold crops still in there. The cabbages are just about ready to bud up and become big heads of cabbage. I've since netted them because we had cabbage loopers flying through here trying to lay their eggs on it, so that keeps the cabbage loopers off. And I just do that with some stakes and some bird netting. These really cool yellow flowers are actually parsnips that self-seeded from last year. And they're just such cool plants. So I just let them grow because I think they bring in lots of nice pollinators to give your tomatoes and berries and things some pollination. And they look cool. So this is an arbor that we got one year for our anniversary. We are growing sweet peas on it, as well as a really pretty heritage climbing rose. And then I kind of throughout here, I'm still struggling a little bit with the grass, but I found the more ground covers I plant throughout here, the less I deal with the grass. So I'm just planting really heavy on the ground covers here, and I really like the mosaic-y look that it brings to this space. Our patio or entertaining area. David laid all of these pavers himself. When we first moved in, again, this was all grass. We're drying some shallots there on the grill. And then just a lot of nice, really pretty perennials. Bigger shrubs have been added throughout. We planted that crabapple tree that you see in front of the blue spruce there. Sorry, I don't know what our neighbors are doing. But that's pretty much the overall view of it all. I don't have a lot of time to get into the logistics of this area, but I figured I'd give you a little tour preview of it, talk about some of the plants, and then we also have a side garden that we'll do a separate video on because we're both running low on time. And I'd like to spend more time on that area. So you guys have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your gardens, enjoy life. I wish you a happy Saturday and a great weekend. And if you guys like this video, like and subscribe. We look forward to giving you some more content soon.